And
It's been tweeted on the tweeters.
it's been tweeted on the Twitter.
Those sunny days.
Oh wait,
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Whiskey Lounge. I am Brandon, one of your hosts. As per usual, I have my friends here with me. Nick,
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode.
of course, of course. Then we have usually with us Trevor
Hello, hello.
and a new gentleman who's, I'm sure you'll love his voice, Remy.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Alrighty, so we're gonna jump right into this. I'm just gonna go off and read this to you before anything. A Los Angeles attorney has been suspended for misgendering and dead naming a convicted child molester who identifies as a transgender woman. Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon suspended Shay Sana, I believe that's how you pronounce that, the lead prosecutor of a 26-year-old convicted child molester James Tubbs, who now goes by Hannah. Sana was reportedly suspended for 5 days without pay. Tubbs is currently accused of beating a man to death with a rock in Kern County Forest. The lead prosecutor alleged Tubbs had attempted to use their transgender identity to game the justice system, which led to Gascon's decision to suspend the attorney, per Fox News. I was suspended for speaking out against the Gascon administration, Sana wrote. Misgendering Tubbs while informing them that they were being played is just their excuse for suspension. Fox News national correspondent Bill Malugan, again, believe that's how you pronunciate that, noted Tubbs was referred to as James in 2020 Kern County jail records, appearing to corroborate Sana's claim. Sana, who has previously been critical of Gascon and former advisor Lisa Blair regarding her handling of separate case, received a complaint filed by the former advisor. She did it in retaliation, the lead prosecutor told Fox News Digital. Part of it, the reason why I was suspended, is because I called out Tubbs to the administration and said I had recordings of him making up the name, gaming the system, joking about it, and the date that it was made up. And I had reports where he was referring to himself as a grown-ass man. It wasn't like I was going around being transphobic or malicious. I brought it to their attention that they had a convicted child rapist trying to get himself into a juvenile facility as a woman, and he rapes little girls. Does anyone see a problem with that? I happen to see a problem with that in this entire transgender ideology. The fact that this person was even suspended for this is absurd to me. And I will also say, I forgot to say at the beginning, that was from Timcast.
I mean, they've been kind of doing this for a while. They've been having transgenders trying to get into, opposite sex, biological sex prisons.
Oh yeah,
And
no,
people
it's-
claiming to be, and it's clear that it's explicitly just to, be in a more forgiving environment. Typically, it's a biological man trying to get into a female prison.
Oh yeah, and I'm pretty sure you guys remember. I think it was in 2020, with 2020 or 2021 when this came out. The report of a transgender woman getting put into a federal woman's prison, and like it was within 2 or 3 months, there were between 6 and 15. I can't remember the exact number. I feel
Women
like
who
it's
were
9.
pregnant, right?
Yeah, it's a whole
Yeah.
bunch.
Yeah, it's something
Like-
like that. I know what you're talking about.
Like just what I don't understand how this sort of thing works. I mean, we see it everywhere. It's not just here. Leah Thomas, I think, is her name now.
Yes, Leah Thomas.
I mean, did you guys see that one of the girls that he, and it is a he, there's no way it's not. She was talking about how like he would go in the locker room and undress and do all that in front of him, and he still got male genitalia. Or
Well, yes, the interesting thing it's funny you bring up Leah Thomas. The interesting thing with Leah Thomas is there's quite a bit of evidence just looking at their Instagram and I believe their Twitter and the things that they like, showing that their type of transgenderism is purely a sexual fetish. I don't know why I have to sit here and affirm this person's sick, twisted sexual fetish, but Apparently, I have to, according to most people. And apparently, as you see in this article, we're fine with trying these people as their preferred gender, even if they're in for some sort of rape. Like this is pure lunacy. I
Oh,
degeneracy is the word. Of course, it's degeneracy, but that doesn't maybe fit here. It's just completely absurd that they would even
It's
think of allowing this to happen.
it's because if you dead name them, you're transphobic. And none of these DAs, none of these lawyers, none of these prosecutors are willing to have the woke mob come after them to try to cancel them under the guise of being
Well,
transphobic,
this isn't
whether
even
it's
woke
true or
mob.
not.
That's the sad thing. Like they got suspended by the judge. You know,
well,
like
so
what are you
I
supposed to
mean,
do against that?
I mean, at this point, realistically, when we talk about the woke mob, there's, and this is such a multi-level problem, but what we're talking about right now, like with the woke mob, just trying to dissect that, you have, your typical blue-haired overweight college fat chick, right, who believes Karl Marx is the be-all end-all, and that's Jesus, right? And then you have like your more tame people, kind of the people who split from the live and let live and kind of lean towards the woke mob as more of a, well, it is live and let live sort of, but I don't want to get hurt by it. And now you have it in the political system where the those sorts of people, the live and let live, the people who are willing to bend, they're bending over from that pressure, and this is what you get. I'm sure the judge, or what's her name, the district attorney, right? I'm sure that they suspended this person from years. Like there has to be a year-long, multi-year-long buildup of, I don't want this to happen to me. I don't want this to happen to me. I don't want this to happen to me. And now I'm in office, so I really don't want this to happen to me. And it's more of a self-protection bubble. So it seems like these people are evil, and in a way they are, but it's not for quite the reason that a lot of people blame them for. It's because they don't have a spine. It's not so much that they believe wholeheartedly in this stuff, but they're part of the like 80% of people that go with the flow. You have
Well, what
10% of the people who do nothing, 10% of the people who there are 10% of people who never change, 10% of the people who are willing to lead the change, and 80% of the people who go with the flow. And that's what's happening here.
what it mostly is what some people might call squish Republicans, and squish Republicans positions are just liberal positions from 10 years ago. They went from, oh, feminism is fine, but homosexuality is absurd. Then it was, okay, homosexuality is fine, but gay marriage is absurd. And it was, all right, gay marriage is fine, but this gender queer stuff, that can't happen. And now we're at today where they're like, that gender queer stuff is fine, just keep it away from the kids. And it's just going to keep going down and down and down this slippery slope. And the only place that slope ends at, people don't like to hear it, people don't want to believe it, but the only place that slope ends at is pedophilia being normalized. I mean, you already had that one, I don't remember exactly what company it is, I could be wrong saying it was Facebook, but some company put out that like really big LGBTQ flag that had all the flags put together on it, and in a little corner there was the minor attracted person flag, as they call it, with the pedophile flag, but it was this big company that added it to that. And I believe that they ended up claiming that they didn't know what it meant, but that means one of two things: they're either lying, or they really have no idea what the hell they're talking about with this ideology. They just see all the flags and know it gets some progressive brownie points.
I mean, you can't very well say that the corporations have these groups in mind. All they're trying to do is they're trying to go after a demographic. They're trying to go after a base where they think they can get money from, moving slightly away from the transgenderism, but sticking with the whole topic from the corporations trying to do what they can. Take a look at for example, Black History Month or the Gay Pride Month, whenever they come around, you see all these corporations change their logo to either being all black to being a rainbow. But that's only for Western countries. That's only for the US. It's only for England. That's only for the places where it's accepted. Now, if you take a look at the Middle East, if you take a look at more Eastern countries like China or Russia, they flat out refuse to change it because one, it's illegal in those countries. And two, they know that there's not a market there to be able to try to grift to these people. They know they're not going to make any money doing it. The only reason why they push all this is because they think they can make a quick buck.
And well, the sad part is it works. I mean, it's one of those weird things where stupid people buy into other stupid ideas. It's like Apple. When Gay Pride Month comes around, I think it's June. Apple, like you get all the comparison photos, and you have Apple on one side with the rainbow in the US, Canada, all of the EU, and then you look at Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and it's just a regular Apple logo. Like, even the Western, it doesn't have to be a market, or not a market, but a company based in one of these countries. It can be even just a Western country realizing that they can make a quick buck off of some moron who has bought into this stuff hook, line, and sinker. And, on the one hand, it's like, good for you. That is capitalism. Not going to fault you for it. But at the same time, it's the agenda that they're pushing and they're making the quick buck off of that is the problem. Right?
Them making in the end goal, I guess not the end goal, in the grand scheme of things though, the problem with that, I guess you can say, is sure we can say, well, it's just capitalism. That's what the libertarian types would say, because they're not the most intelligent sorts. Sorry, libertarians. But at the end of the day, if you degrade society to the point where it falls apart, your money isn't going to matter. You're hurting yourself in the long run, going with the short-term trend of whatever this ideology is. That is, again, just going to destroy the country. I mean, it's going to destroy, I guess maybe not the country, destroy society as we know it. We have people out here who are trying to affirm mutilation on children. Like Matt Walsh did that March and child mutilation. I think that was a beautiful thing. The fight that he's fighting down there in like the deep south, I guess you can call it, like Mississippi, Tennessee. It is just a wonderful fight. There's a reason I am moving to Tennessee, and it is because that is the epicenter for where this fight is starting and spreading from. And if I know about one of those, if I hear about one of those marches, I know he wants to do them in other places. If I hear about them up here in the Northeast, I am going to every single one and just supporting it in whatever way I can, because we are in this fight and we have to actually fight rather than just sit here and talk about it.
Well, speaking
My
about
only
these
argument-
corporations, I mean, you're saying, oh, that isn't capitalism. It's very closed off. I mean, it is capitalism at its, like, what it is. But you're right, they're being short-sighted, but it's because most people aren't thinking about, legacy anymore. They're thinking about, okay, well, how much money can I make while I'm alive? Because after that, it doesn't really matter.
That's essentially what I was saying. I might have misspoke there a little bit, but that's essentially what I was saying. I'm not saying it wasn't capitalism, as yes, it is capitalism, but that can only go so far. Just saying, oh, it's capitalism, to let them do whatever they want.
I get what you're saying. I think you spoke it well. I'm just trying to kind of add on to that point where
I gotcha.
there's this ideology and they're making a quick buck off of it. They're not necessarily agreeing with it. They're just trying to make a quick buck off of it. And by, they're hurting themselves in such that they're furthering it, they're spreading it more. And I don't even think that they're really considering that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's a like such a basic concept, and it's kind of weird. I really want to start digging into like how we as a society, but the entire West has moved away from this type of mentality where, boil it down extremely, extremely basic. You have a son, right? You name that son after you. And that is your legacy, is that, you created another human being to carry your name into the next generation, right? And you see, like, people are fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation of the same name. They're carrying on that legacy. Companies used to do that too. I think it was like the early 50s, late 40s when Henry Ford II took over for his dad. And his whole thing for like 15, 20 years was, I have to make this I have to do something so great to this company that, I can say I built on what my grandfather did when he started this company. And so that's like, that tied into the whole Ford Ferrari business in the 60s. There was just so much stuff going into American businesses on, I need to affect the change that my parents and my grandparents and my great grandparents did to this country. And now we're seeing, like Trevor said, this whole, well, I'm going to die. I'm going to get as much stuff as I can before I die. And what happens with it after, I don't care because I'm dead. Like, that's just the wrong mentality.
Well, a lot of it,
I
and this is
agree.
a side tangent, so this is kind of the last that I'll say about it, but it's been a switch from that really started after the Great Depression, and it only continued as there had to be more government bailouts and yada yada yada, and more companies became public and less were privately owned. You'll see some companies that are still privately owned still hold to their values and are more of a legacy thing. Like Chick-fil-A, they hold to their values, they keep their principles for the most part. And I mean, there's a few of them out there. The one that my father worked for and was really big about was Steel. It was a family-owned company for the longest time. Family had majority. It was publicly traded, but family still had majority and they controlled it. And that's really this day and age. If you want to keep a company going and, keep those principles that the company was started with, the only way to do it. Because otherwise they're going to have a, kid out of college, freshly out of college with an MBA take over, and they're going to be pushing these ideals and just seeing how much money that they can make as quick as possible. And it's all a numbers game to them.
Oh,
And
yeah. I mean,
as
Facebook
we've
is
been
the perfect example of that.
yeah, as we've been saying, uh, you know, hard times breed hard people, strong men, and then, that just goes into breeding weak men, and it's an endless cycle. And we're in that turn where there's a lot of weak men out there because they've been bred in easy times, and they don't want to, run these companies. They've been raised off of all this money, and they're used to it, and they don't have any ambition to build these companies. And so that's what's happening, is they're kind of making the quick buck, selling off, and it's being turned over to these lawyers and, marketers and all that just don't really have any investment into the company. They're just making a quick buck off of it, which is, to bring it all back around, the issue of this ideology spreading and why it's being so proliferant to the point where a judge is suspending a prosecutor for misgendering somebody.
Yeah, it's just, it's
You
nuts.
don't even need to go to the extreme. Like at the end of the day, you don't need to go to the extreme of a business or anything. People in general, or people our generation in general, they're not having kids as much. Hell, some of them aren't even moving out. I don't remember where I got the statistic from. Someone was telling me about it, where the average age for people to live at home in our generation is till they're 40. Like that is ridiculous. I couldn't even imagine that. I was out of my mom's house the moment I graduated high school. I love my mother, but for the love of God, I was not staying there a minute longer.
Oh,
But
yeah.
no one wants kids anymore. No one wants a legacy. No one has the ambition to do anything. That was another thing. As a little sidetrack here, but I saw someone go on a tangent on like a TikTok the other day. He was like, "Well, people are telling me that I have to work to get things. What if I don't want to work? What if I don't have any aspirations? What if I don't want to be a millionaire? What if I don't want to be rich? What if I just want to live, man?" And I was appalled. I was completely appalled. Like, I don't have the aspiration to be, Philip Moneybags or anything either. But, I want something. I want to make something of myself. I want to be someone who my future children will be proud of in some way. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. But I can see, I guess I can see where this ideology came from, just from this pure try to make the world easy, since we, meaning the generation before the baby boomers, went through such hard times as in World War II.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you want to go back to the baby boomers, we could go on a whole podcast on like how they wanted to just almost build back better, to use Biden's whole thing uh from the war. There were a lot of things that like right after the war, people realized that before the war were kind of messed up, and so they started changing them. I mean, Eisenhower is a very basic one. Eisenhower, Truman, when they got together and said, "Hey, we're going to desegregate the army," right? Like that whole thing came about after the war because people realized it was kind of messed up, so they changed it. But that set in motion, and it's not saying that that's bad changes. It's just like the uh, the civil rights movement of the '60s. That was a good thing. The women's suffrage movement in the '20s, that was a good thing, but it set the ball rolling, and it hasn't stopped. And that's the problem we're facing today. We're facing all these issues. The NFA is because of the Women's Suffrage Act. Not many people know that. We're still dealing with problems from the 1920s because they stood on the hill, pushed the ball, and said, "Let's see how far this will go." But nobody thought of what happens when it gets too big, and that's what we're dealing with this trans issue, with the NFA, with the renewed like racism, right? That's all coming back around for full circle because nobody said stop the ball. We did it. We fixed what we wanted to fix.
We have gone so far left and so progressive. We are now reverting back to our roots.
Yeah, my favorite clip of like that describes how far racism has gone. Like people say like, "Oh, there's still racism." I agree there is, but I think it's often skewed in the other way because there's a great quote from Morgan Freeman. He was being interviewed on 60 Minutes, I believe it was. And the interviewer asked him what he thought about Black History Month. And Morgan Freeman essentially said, paraphrasing of course, "I think it's ridiculous. It's a stupid idea. Do you have a White History Month?" And it's basically just making a joke essentially in under the guise of, praise and like hailing this culture in its targeted racism. And that's what it is. And yet we've made it like a national, internationally, I believe it is actually, internationally recognized event.
Yeah, it's just weird to think about how, and I'm not saying that, these different histories shouldn't be talked about, but it shouldn't be exclusively revered and put on a pedestal, right? Like, yeah, Black history is cool, but it's American history, right? Like,
Because
we
everyone
all
wants
came
their
as
wants their special brownie day. Like everyone wants their special brownie day because everyone's a narcissist. And that's what a lot of it comes down to. I mean, I've said this to Nick before. I might have said it to all of you before. A lot of problems nowadays all come down to some form of narcissism. Everyone wants their brownie day because me, and that's what it is.
Well,
I will have to agree with you for your for the narcissism thing when it comes to the me and this whole transgender movement. It from sitting back trying to listen to everything, trying to watch everything. It almost seems like it's trendy to be trans now. Whereas in the past, it was such a sparse number of people in the population. The percentage was so down. And we're seeing trends where it is raising at an exceedingly high rate that has never been seen before in history. I think a lot of it has to do with lonely people who are mentally unwell, who are just trying to find a group of people that quote unquote will accept them for who they are no matter what, when all they really need to do is just find someone to help them,
It's an identity
not
crisis.
accept for them.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
Yeah,
yes,
100%
exactly.
an identity crisis because in the 1940s, everybody was under this nationalistic idea. It was nationalism, and by no means am I saying nationalism necessarily is a perfect system. I mean, it's given rise to some of the worst regimes in history, but it's not a bad thing to be a patriot. I think often nationalism and patriotism get confused, and they're two very different things. You can identify as an American and be proud of that fact and be a patriot, and that's not a bad thing. But unfortunately, it got such a bad rep in that they pushed the idea of globalism, and then they pushed the ideas of identity politics and all that, and so they're trying to push us away from identifying as a white man or as a black man or any of these other things, and basically saying if you say that you're racist. So what are we supposed to call ourselves at this point? Like, what can I identify as?
Yeah,
Well,
well,
they,
I
they
mean,
want you to call yourself, what is it, like cis white male? But I
yeah,
was watching a video the other day. The word cis has like I'm gonna try to find it here while Remy talks. But the word cis has like a really bad origin, like a really bad origin. Let me try to find it
I
while
mean,
Remy talks.
shit. When I think of cis, the first time I heard that, I was like, why are you talking about Star Wars? Because growing
What?
up,
Hold. Star
growing up,
Wars?
yeah, no,
It's like
growing
the
up
Is he
in
thinking
CIS.
the
like,
early
oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, okay,
early
okay,
2000s,
okay.
right? You like I played like Battlefront 2, the original like Star Wars Battlefront games. I was doing all that, and I think like you see CIS, and I'm thinking battle droids and all this, and then
Dude,
it comes
that's
out.
10
Oh
times
well, it's
cooler
like
than what it actually
it,
is.
yeah,
Come on, man. I
it
wish.
is. And it's like, bro, hell yeah. But at the same time, it's like they're adding so many different, like, it's almost a longer sentence than saying your name, right? Even if you have a massively long name, like 20 letters plus 15 syllables, it's still longer than just saying your name. And what my biggest thing, right, with this whole ordeal is why can't you just say, I'm an American? How hard is it to say, oh, I'm American, or, I'm actually this random European country, right? I'm a, I am this. And then it should be that easy. It should be as easy as you're American, I'm American, they're American,
Because
right?
being an American, like saying you're an American, there's nothing racist about that. There's nothing sexist about that. You know,
No, there's nothing that they can
there's
manipulate.
nothing wrong with that, but they're trying to make it a whole wrong thing. And no, like identify as something else. And then it's like kind of a word of the week situation where one week you can say that you're cis white, but next week it'll be a taboo word to say, and they're just constantly going through these words and trying to find the one that everybody's happy with. But it's human nature to be somebody's going to be unhappy with something somebody's saying. Like if you've ever been anywhere on the internet, that is 100% true. You're never going to find something that everybody's going to be happy with. So I think it's kind of a moot point for us to continue trying. And the fact that it's reached into our judicial system to the point where a prosecutor who is employed by the government can't say in a government facility, quote unquote misgendering somebody and gets suspended for that. I mean, this is basically to the point where we're like Canada and misgendering somebody is hate speech.
I mean, realistically, that's a breach of the First Amendment. If you break it down all the way, that is a legal breach of the First Amendment. And that guy, I wouldn't be surprised to see that guy sue on grounds that it violates his First Amendment rights to punish him for words like that, right? Especially being that it is a it is a government position. There's
And
no way he doesn't sue
the fact that he was a
because
judge and also that he got suspended for it rather than them having like to what do they call it when you have to revise what was said in the actual like a ledger of the court.
oh yeah, I can't remember what
But
it's
like
called,
they
but I know
didn't
what
just
you're
have
talking
them
about.
like edit the log or anything. Like they suspended him for it.
Yeah. Ooh, no. So it's even better than a judge, right? So it's the district attorney that suspended them. which
Oh,
is
I thought it was
better.
the judge. That's
No, it
yeah,
was
that's
the
worse.
attorney.
That's way
that's
worse.
yeah, because this is an elected position. If you guys remember your political systems correctly, and maybe I'm messing up, but I'm pretty sure that is an elected position. And
Yes, it is.
and now looking at it, Los Angeles district elected position. This is entirely based on liberalism. So there's no way that that was anything other than liberal agendas. And that is, I mean, downfall of California, holy shit. But that's First Amendment rights that they're stomping on now. They've already essentially taken away Second Amendment rights there. So it's not like anybody can do anything about it. This
And
is great.
the best part about that is
So-
he tanked his own prosecutor. He's sidelined
like-
his own prosecutor, like suspended him for
So-
like
So a lot of this stems from the fact that yes, while you can elect these DAs, and a lot of them are Soros funded DAs, where George Soros will donate to their political causes. It's very easy to run. Well, I'm not going to say it's very easy because I've never done it. It is relatively easy compared to all of the other positions in government to run for, to be able to get a DA. And where I think that the left is absolutely brilliant to be able to get this woke crap into the government is by going after these DA positions, because all it does is accentuate the issues for not prosecuting crime, for allowing certain things to get by. I mean, look at all of the Summer of Love rioters who were able to just keep rioting throughout the entirety of that summer, and how many of them were let off charges, how many of them had their charges dropped for violent crimes because of these Soros-backed DAs and these woke DAs who believed in the cause and just refused to go after it. You have you have the entirety of the Summer of Love where very few people got charged, and if they did get charged, it was slapped in a wrist. But then you have everything that happened on January 6th, where little old Meemaw was just walking into the Capitol because the police opened up the doors and said, "We don't agree with you, but we support your right to protest." Get 2 years in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
They are in the perfect positions to be able to gatekeep the ability to run the country. You don't need somebody in a high office to be able to run the country. You need to be in the right position. You need to be that gatekeeper.
Yeah, and
Mob
the
rule,
perfect
essentially.
example actually, um, as like a counter, or as a comparison, is I don't know if you guys saw, didn't see, paid attention to or not, but the Oklahoma Capitol building got stormed. Nothing happened.
Yep.
Because the
Yeah,
liberals
that was a few
stormed
days
it,
ago.
right? That
Mhm.
I mean, that should have been plastered
come
all
on.
over the news if we're holding anything to a standard, but there is no standard. Therefore, it just kind of happened, and then it's gone.
I mean, we've
Poof, gone with the
had
wind.
Chaz, we've had the Atlanta one, like we've had all of these,
Yeah, I mean, why isn't
autonomous zones built in America, in American capitals of states, and nothing's happened.
Yeah, like
It's
the last
utterly
time that realistically happened, we went to war with ourselves and kicked our own asses for 4.5 years. Like-
Did anyone else watch the video of Steven Crowder when he sent people into Chaz and they were chased out by Antifa through the
Yes.
night? It was fucking
Yes.
hilarious. Also, if I may backtrack a moment to what I was talking about before I found it. So, the word doesn't have a different meaning, but the first use of the word cisgender was by a man named Volkmar Sigash. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't care. He is a terrible person. He is one of the people who is accredited with starting the LGBTQ movement. He is also someone who believed pedophilia is a sexuality. This is the person who created the term cisgender. He believes pedophilia is a sexuality and there's nothing wrong with that primal urge and only something wrong with those who act on it. Truly disgusting, horrible stuff. And these are the people that they look up to.
Wait, can you say his name again? Because that sounds very familiar. Isn't that the
Volkmar Siegush, he's a German sexologist.
Isn't that the sexologist that we based all of our health classes on?
I don't
from all
know
of his
for
research.
sure, but it's
I believe
possible he is someone who is credited with quite a lot of things, at least particularly in the LGBTQ community.
because
Um,
if I remember correctly, there was one sexologist who Matt Walsh featured pretty heavily on in his documentary "What Is a
you
Woman."
mean John Monet? You might be
Yes,
thinking of John
it,
Monet. John Monet is
the
another
one
one. Yeah.
the one that had all those children perform sex acts and he monitored their gratification.
That was John
Okay,
Monet.
okay, my bad.
True,
Well,
truly
hold on, hold on.
disgusting, truly despicable. Go on.
Can we? Yeah, no. Can we just pause for a second? You said he had minors, under 18. I'm gonna guess under 14.
All the
Perform
way,
sex
all the
acts.
way to babies, all the way to
Per-
babies.
Perform sex acts,
And this
and
is
he
one of the
monitored him.
heroes. This is one of the heroes of the LGBTQ ideology.
We executed Nazis for less. What it, this? I'm gonna be honest. This is the first time I'm hearing this. What the fuck?
This is definitely, me and Nick, if you haven't noticed, are a little deeper into this fight.
Yeah, you guys went down the
Yeah.
rabbit hole. I'm not. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not blaming you
Yeah,
because,
no, of
like,
course.
what
But yeah,
the
it's
hell?
the deeper you go, and the reason I am the way I am in particular, Remy, as I'm sure you've noticed, I'm a little different than a lot of people, is because I've gone deep and I know what's at the bottom of this fucking hole.
Well, I mean, okay, so a couple of years ago, I had a buddy I worked with, right? And I agree with him on this statement. Absolutely, 100% till the day I die, right? I actually repeat it multiple times a week, maybe even daily at this point. Furries die first, but pedophiles are a close second. The only reason furries die first is because most of them are pedophiles, right? Like,
Weird
the purge
sentiment, but
happened.
alright.
The purge
That's a
happens.
very interesting
hunting
sentiment. I don't know if I completely agree with.
Yeah, so actually, if you go down, if you really want to go down this rabbit hole, because this is one rabbit hole I've gone down. Like, you go on 4chan, 8chan, don't ask me how I found 4chan. It happened, all right? You go down these places, and these guys, like these furries, right? They're talking about how their whatever, their persona, right, wants to go fuck these kids. And they want to trade children. And it's like you have like these parents, and they're saying, well, my persona wants to have sex with your kids. Your persona wants to have sex with my kids. We can trade them, and we can rape each other's children, and they're perfectly fine with that. Like, what kind? There's a mental level of fucked up that you can only go so far and not say, why are you still alive, right?
Okay, so I'm going to, since Brandon and I have already opened the wormhole, that is John Money. This is. Do you know about David Raymer?
No, I've never heard that name.
Okay, David Raymer is a guy who was born as a male,
Right.
but when he was born, and you know how they circumcise men.
Yeah.
The
I mean,
circumcision was botched.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
The circumcision was botched. So John Money came into the picture and is like, we're going to reassign him from being a man to a woman, and we are going to raise him as a woman.
So, okay, question. Before you continue the story, I just have one question. This is so that, like, I get this mental picture and the timeline and everything else right. How botched are you talking with the circumcision? Like, cut halfway off? Like, is there still something there?
It's gone. It's gone.
It's gone. Yeah, it's
It
completely
is.
Balls and all?
Yes.
Yes. Originally it was just the shaft, but since it was as mangled as it was, John Money came in and they just removed everything, and
Okay.
essentially made it look like he had female
Basically
genitalia
turned
down there.
this child into an experiment from the
So-
moment he was born.
That's
This is a paper that was published back in 2017. by Phil Gayatno, and it is on the Embryo Project Encyclopedia. In the mid-1960s, psychologist John Money encouraged the gender reassignment of David Raymer, who was born a biological male but suffered irreparable damage to his penis as an infant. Born in 1965 as Bruce Raymer, his penis was irreparably damaged during the infancy due to a failed circumcision. After encouragement from Money, Raymer's parents decided to raise Raymer as a girl. Raymer underwent surgery as an infant to construct rudimentary female genitalia and was given female hormones during puberty. During childhood, Raymer was never told he was biologically male and regularly visited Money, who tracked the progress of his gender reassignment. So they made this kid grow up as a female and constantly go back to Money, who was trying to constantly reaffirm that he was a girl. Well, David went on to do multiple interviews after everything came out. He was on Oprah Winfrey, and he just flat out said, "I knew I was wrong. I saw all these guys. They were climbing trees. They were playing with GI Joes, but I was told I had to play with dolls." And he knew something was wrong, but he didn't know about it entirely. Well, being raised in this way, his entirety of his life, he killed himself at 38 just because of all the trauma and everything that he went through. He had a twin brother. This is the fucked up part.
What?
John, he had a twin brother. John Money did experiments by having the two of them have sex to try to stimulate David.
Again, I'm just going to revisit the statement I said earlier. We hung Nazis for less.
Yeah.
It's on the one hand, that's mass genocide, but some of the stuff that these fucking evil human beings were literally executed for in public, mass genocide is a little bit lower than human experimentation, right? Is it?
Well,
I wouldn't say it's lower.
I'll say this too. The Nazis were
They did it too.
They did a lot of human
they absolutely did it.
I understand your sentiment though, Remy. I will say that. I wouldn't necessarily agree with a higher or a lower, but I understand your sentiment.
You understand why it's not
get
lower.
Your sentiment.
Yes.
I get what you're saying.
It's just unfortunate that there's a lot of instances like that, and Project Paperclip and all that. We did a lot of disgusting stuff. And a lot of it goes unnoticed because of political connections, money, and just various things. And if you can keep something out of the eyes of the public and keep it quiet most of the time, you're okay.
So to continue on with this, because it gets worse. It gets much worse.
Holy shit.
During the twins' psychiatric visits with Money, and as part of his research, Raymer and his twin brother were directed to inspect one another's genitals and engage in behavior resembling sexual intercourse. Raymer claimed that much of Money's treatment involved the forced reenactment of sexual positions and motions with his brother. In some exercises, the brothers rehearsed missionary positions with thrusting motions, which Money justified as rehearsal of healthy childhood sexual exploration.
Yeah. Pretty much.
This is the guy who is quoted to be like be all end all. He's the pioneer of gender reassignment
of this entire community.
I mean,
it's truly
the sad thing is most people don't know that. Most people that are behind this, they don't know that, and the only people that really know about that stuff are the people that are, that's how they think as well, and they're, standing behind it and in full agreement, and then they spread this idea, this diluted version of it that enough people can get behind, and enough people have kind of, aren't thinking about too much and don't know enough about to, think anything different, and they can spread that enough to enough people and make it seem right to those people, and they silence everybody that goes against them.
You know, it just boggles the mind, right? But the entire time, you were saying that, I kept thinking about this KGB agent interview. I'm sure you guys have seen it, but I think it was like 1991 or 92, maybe as late as 95. This like former KGB agent who defected to the U.S. He did like a 60-minute interview or something, and he basically explained how the Soviet Union had this whole plan set up. It was a multi-generational thing, and I don't think he said when it started. At least I didn't hear it. And I haven't heard the entire interview. I've gotten clips, but he talks about this whole thing where the Soviet plan was to slowly and generationally infect the U.S. with mental disease per se, where they start in the education system and they basically change the education system incrementally to create a United States that no longer, patriotism is gone. There's so much confusion. There's all this other like crap going on that distracts the American population from being Americans, and that's how the Soviets win, right? And it just thinking about it, you take that, right? And then you go into these human experimentation, the gender reassignment stuff, the racism stuff, and you think about all this, and then you plug it in with Putin was a KGB agent as well. And it's like, holy shit, did it work? Is it working right now? Is what we are living through right now the fruition of this Soviet plan?
There's
Because
there's a few more interesting pieces to what you just said, like regarding the Jaffe files and a few other, like Putin, the type of propaganda that Putin uses even nowadays. We can go off on that for as long as we've gone off on this. I think we've had a little. I think we've had enough sadness here and horrible news. I think we got a lot in that. We've gone about probably nearly an hour with that. So I say we move on to our final topic for tonight, because ourselves, I know us. I know my good friends here. We'll go on with this forever, but I'd like to get into that KGB thing you mentioned, as well as the Jaffe files, which are very similar another time for sure. But let's move on. Nick, I'm gonna let you take the reins on this one, because I'm not nearly as invested into it as you are, but I do find it very funny what you pointed out to me earlier.
Okay, so you're making it seem like I'm like super invested in the like meat and the like idea of it.
I get you're not that invested either, but you find it a lot funnier than I do.
I am more interested in the meat and potatoes, the like cultural ramifications, because I am like the cultural guy. I've been very much interested in the conversation that we've been having, but you can tell I'm like really into this, because it's like, holy hell, what the hell is happening to America? And it has to do with Chicago. It has to do with Lori Lightfoot. And she said that the only reason that she lost is for racism issues. Well, you know what? I think she was a crackpot mayor, but she is very correct in this one. Now, not in the sense that you are thinking, but in the sense of Chicago is a very diverse but segregated place in the U.S. If you take a look at the demographic breakdowns and the electoral map that Chicago had for its past election, you're going to notice some very, very interesting correlations. They might not be causation. They might just be they might just be there just to be there. But if you look there in the top left corner of Chicago, in the middle right corner, the lower right corner, and the lower left corner, they are
smashing.
I'm working on it right now.
Trevor,
Just give me
my
2
bad.
seconds.
Well, yeah, give some reference. We're talking like Park Ridge,
Hold on. Let
Oak
me.
Lawn.
I
Trevor's
am.
getting him up. Trevor's getting him up.
Yeah.
Just give him a moment.
Okay.
But
Well,
go
I
on.
just shared my screen in case you would like to use it, so I can just do the whole breakdown with my cursor. So, if you're looking at the top left section where O'Hare is near Ward 39, 45, and all that area, they were all those areas voted for Paul Vallis. If you're looking at Lincoln Park, if you're looking at the Loop area, also Paul Vallis. Going down to Roseland on both sides of Roseland, Paul Vallis, Paul Vallis. Well, if you look over to my right map that I have here, it is a demographic breakdown of the population based on race in Chicago. Let's look up near O'Hare. Primarily white. Voted for the white guy. Lincoln Park area. Primarily white. Voted for the white guy. And both the areas on the outside of Roseland, white, pretty well mixed, voted for the white guy. Let's go to the Hispanic demographic and see what kind of correlation we get. You look at Little Village, who voted for Jesus Garcia. Little Village is primarily Hispanic. Left to the west of Logan Square, Ward 31, primarily Hispanic in its entirety. Now we're going to go on to the last demographic, which is the areas that Lori Lightfoot won. Primarily all black, exceptionally high levels of African American people living in Chicago in these locations, which are the areas that she won. Now, there is another candidate whose name is Brandon Johnson. He is also an African American who is running for the mayoral, and he won second place in the runoff so far. And I believe that him and Vallis are going to be going head to head. Anyway, he won the northeastern part of Chicago in a predominantly liberal area, very woke area. What I'm seeing, and it might not be entirely correct, it might just be seeing a correlation. It seems like the people who are voting in these elections don't really care about policy. They don't really care about what they're voting for. They care about voting for who looks like them. And I might be entirely wrong with that. But the way I'm seeing these race breakdowns on their voting demographics and where they live, that is a very strong correlation that I am seeing.
It's I would put a lot of money on that you're right, because we've seen it before in presidential elections. 2007 when Obama got elected, right? I remember, none of us, at least I don't think any of us were old enough to vote then, but we remember talking to people or our parents talking to people, and I will never forget this conversation for as long as I live. One of my dad's colleagues at work, at his job, they were having a discussion. Good guys, all of them. And there was this one black guy in there, and my dad asked him, because he didn't vote for Obama. Of course, he didn't really like any of the candidates at the time, but he didn't vote for Obama because he said this guy's policies are trash, right? And he asked the black guy, he was like, why did you vote for him? And the black guy said, I want to see a black man be president. That is the exact verbiage. That is a direct quote. I will never forget it for as long as I live. And it's like, you vote, people are now voting for people that look like them, period. And it's insanity, right?
Well, that's the reality of most of America, honestly. I mean, people don't want to admit it, but most of America doesn't know what the hell they're voting for. They really don't, and they kind of just look and they're like, Steve Smith. He sounds like a good guy, not Jerome Davis. Like it's a lot of it is that, and it's really it's probably always been a little bit of that. And
It's
not.
always been.
I wouldn't even call it racism or anything though. It's just they don't know what they're talking about.
Well,
Steve
it's
Smith seems like a normal guy. Let's vote for Steve Smith. That's about as normal a name as you can get. President Smith, how you doing?
I mean, it's
I'm doing
realistically, if
quite
you
well.
Look-
It's
Yeah, of course you
always
do
been
that.
a case of, I mean, going back to 1776 and since then, a case of people are going to vote for who they think embodies themselves the most, because you want people to be acting the way that you would. Like, everybody imagines, well, if I was president, I would be doing this and this and this. That's how most people talk about it. Like, I wouldn't do this, I'd be doing this. And you want to see the person in office doing the things that you would do. But typically people aren't going to read into what Joe Biden did when he was in Congress or whatever, when he was a senator, or any of those cases. Like, they're not going to read back 30 years and see what he did, because this day and age, people just don't care enough. They don't have the time, or they don't have the energy to do it. Like, they just don't care. They don't want to. So they're going to look into it about ankle deep and say, well, he seems okay. I mean, he talked about this thing one time. He looks like a nice guy. And that's about as deep as people go into it. They just take face on appearances. And that's why the debates are so influential, is because people typically click onto them for 5-10 minutes, say, yeah, he made a couple good points, and then click off.
Yeah, and I mean, you combine that, the over education and not over education, extreme overwhelming amounts of information that is available. You get your willful ignorance, and that only helps to feed what I think is the basic part of basic human nature, called, that guy looks like me, he talks like me, he walks like me, I'm going with him. You go back to, like, when we weren't the only species of human, we weren't the only species of man on this planet. That happened. You went with the guy that looked like you. If you were a Homo sapien, you walked with the other Homo sapiens. You didn't walk with this Cro-Magnon moron. His brow looks funny.
Now,
Right?
What?
It's a
I
really
truly-
No,
basic
I don't-
way to
I don't-
go
I don't-
about
I
it,
mean-
but if you think
Sure.
about it,
I mean,
you
I
can-
like it. I
can
going
like
back to
it.
Cro-Magnon
I like it.
politics here.
You're
Well, it's
trying
not
to-
even politics,
You're going
it's
after the
survival.
most simplest.
I like
at that
it.
point,
I like
it's
it.
survival, but you see it all through history, and it starts back at the very beginning of the human race. The Greeks.
Well, yeah. When
I'm
I,
here for
I mean-
the caveman voting. Okay, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. When I was a kid and they gave me like the school voting thing, I don't know why they were asking us to how we would vote. But when I looked at the two candidates, I chose John McCain out of the two, and I'm just remembering this. Obama was the first black person I ever saw.
What?
Ever. He was.
And
he
you
was
grew up
first.
from where
grew
you
up-
grew up.
No, you people you people always think I grew up in New York. I grew up in the Poconos in Pennsylvania.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now-
forget
Now,
I
now, now,
never.
to,
It was Obama. He was the first black person I saw.
now to try to wrap this back around, I honestly do not think it has to do with racism. I really don't
No,
think
it's
it's just people
spaces.
voting based on race. It is people who are voting on what, like you were saying earlier. It's based on who they see, or people that they see themselves as the most. People who they think are going to have the closest thing to what they want, and that's who they're voting for. Whether or not they agree with their policies, whether or not they even know their policies, it just has to do with, hey, I'm going out to go vote. I'm going to vote for someone that name kind of rolls off the tongue for me. If I'm in the Hispanic voting base, or if I'm in the African American voting base, If they don't know the policies, if they don't know who they're voting for, they're just going to vote for somebody who has the name that they like the most. I personally am guilty of it. When I voted for the very first time in 2016, I didn't know who the hell I was voting for. All I knew was I was told to go vote Republican down the ticket. That's what I did, and I should not
choice.
have done that. Well, no, it's not a good choice. Just going in there telling people to vote just to vote, or just to vote for a party because that's who your parents are affiliated with, or that's who you're supposed to be affiliated with, it's wrong. Whether you're on the right or on the left, you need to vote for people based on their policies, not because of what party they belong to.
Yeah, we really
Yeah,
need to
but
get away
it's
from
just
this
like
idea of telling people, okay, you should go vote for this. What you should tell people is you should read into this. You should see
Oh,
this.
yes.
Like you
Yes.
should say, hey, this is an interesting article, and promote this, reading into things, understanding of what's going on around you, and not promote the idea of, oh, it doesn't matter what's going on. You don't need to read this. Just go vote like this and you'll be okay.
Well, you have too many people that like to say, "Oh, I'm not political." What do you mean you're not political? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a reasonable argument, and it's just not viable in a realistic world. You can't not be political. You don't need to be overtly political, I guess. But you need to have a certain level of just politicism to yourself. Excuse me.
Well,
It's all completely ridiculous.
at the end of the day, that whole train of thought is this herd mentality, and it's like we are all separate human beings. We in this podcast we have seen now we all have slightly different thoughts and opinions on everything, depending on our different levels of information and knowledge that we have on the topic. And voting in a herd mentality eliminates that. It turns you into a chip, right? And that's what our political system is right now, is who can get the most chips. It's not, I am an independent person and I'm going to vote based on who has, what I think are the best policies. It's vote blue no matter who. It's
Better red than dead.
And dead.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's
Right.
seen the mass rise of mass propaganda, and that's why it's so proliferant, because it's more an equation of, and you'll hear people at campaign offices and all, because I remember going to a local campaign office. I forget why I was there, but I think it was maybe a school trip or something, and we went to a local campaign office. There was a mayor running or whatever, and all that you can hear of them talking about in the background is numbers. It's pure numbers. That's what they base down politics to, and voters to, is numbers.
So back in 2020, damn, I'm showing my age here. I was following a certain individual whose name was Kim Klacik. She was running for Baltimore, and I thought she had phenomenal ideas and was really going to go far. And I thought she could really try to start turning Baltimore around, because she wanted to bring industry back. She wanted to bring manufacturing back. She wanted to bring Baltimore back to the glory days of what it used to be. She received absolutely no support from the GOP. She received no support because it was in Baltimore, because it was in an area where they are like, we are going to lose no matter what, so we are not going to put our resources in. And I see that as the biggest downfall of the right, is we are too weak and we are too feckless to try to change the mind of people who we've never tried to go after. You know what? Yes, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not going to be able to build the party back and get better ideas and bring more people to the table unless we try to fight and go to these areas where people don't necessarily agree with us, but they've never had another option.
I agree with you. It's super unfortunate, but when you base it down, if you want the GOP to have any sort of chance at even like quote unquote fighting against the pure just money whore that the Democratic Party is at this point, because like how much money have they gotten? I mean, I looked at a figure once, and the amount of money comparatively between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, typically in campaign raised funds, is ridiculous. Like it's David versus Goliath sometimes, especially on the city scale, especially on the city scale. So you really have to, when you boil it down, and it's unfortunate, it does become a numbers game with mass propaganda because people aren't really thinking as much, and they're just like seeing, oh well, I've heard that name pretty often. It must be a good name, must be a good guy because I've heard it so often. But all that boils down to is how many ads they ran, which all boils down to how much money they have.
Hmm.
Yep.
And it's very sad to see that this is the state of American politics. You had people who back in 2020 voted for somebody because they didn't like Orange Man. Orange Man had very mean tweets, so I'm going to vote for somebody who stayed in the basement the entire campaign trail and didn't campaign or do anything at all because Orange Man bad.
Yeah,
And that's the duality of it, is there is an element where the people will become the advertisement, but it's so fickle, unfortunately. Like sometimes people will get behind certain candidates and they'll rally behind. And in the case of, what happened with Joe Biden, and it basically most of the 2020 election, and why I think Trump fared so poorly often, is because people just didn't like him. They basically swore to themselves, I will vote for anybody except for Trump. They didn't even look at Joe Biden's policies. 9 times out of 10,
No.
They didn't even care. They were just saying, I'm not going to vote for this person, and that's not a way to vote.
And that's what's getting us into all of our issues now with expanding the never-ending wars, our terrible botched retreat of Afghanistan, dumping billions and billions of dollars into Ukraine, this woke mind virus that is infecting the entirety of the government as well as a majority of well, I'm not going to say a majority of the U.S., a large portion of the U.S. You're seeing a massive cultural bifurcation between the left and the right, and there's very little semblance of one unifying vision anymore. And a lot of that stems from people who don't care about who they're voting for. They're just voting because they dislike the other person, and that's it. Not because of policies, not because of things they've done in the past. Just straight, I don't like you. I was told not to like you. I've been inundated for 4 years of the mainstream media saying you're a bad person, so I need to vote against you. We need to end that. It needs
And I
to
mean,
stop.
evidenced by these two graphs that you've shown us, it's them being targeted, basically hate towards certain people that they just don't like because they've been essentially told to, or they've been given this one idea. And also they're voting for people that look like them, that they can identify without really knowing their politics often. Like they typically don't know what this person's about. And I will say, with these demographics, oftentimes the reason why they look like this is because those are the areas where they target. They target campaigning in those areas because they know that it's going to be an easier campaign trail for them, and they can secure those votes more often. And basically next year or next campaign, if Lightfoot runs again, which I kind of doubt she will, but that's beside the point. If she does, what she's going to do is she's going to look at this campaign map, and her campaign manager is going to say, okay, well, these are the areas where we're strong, so we're going to go and make sure that we secure those votes. And then they'll pick out little areas where they had a little bit, and they'll try and expand from there. But they always try and secure the vote as much as they can with their base.
Well, yeah, they just preach to their own choir, and there's nothing really wrong with that. It's kind of what they should do, but it's that simple a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with what's going on now, and I definitely think, like, nail on the head, the whole unifying vision that we just haven't had. I mean, the last time we had this level of disunification, civil war happened. I mean, it took 20 years to build up to it, but that's what happened. Every other time in American history, we've had this one unifying vision. And say what you will about never-ending wars, that's human nature. Realistically, the next unifying vision for the country will be a war. And we can definitely, I would love to go down the rabbit hole of like why Ukraine isn't actually as bad as people make it out to be on the right, and why the left is right for all the wrong reasons. But the end state and the summation of my point is that what we need as a country right now is an external threat to unify us. That's what happened at 9/11, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, War of 1812. That was the external threat.
You're not
you're
wrong, but I would say we honestly we might be you could argue that we might be too polarized. I mean, part of the problem is it's not even just two people with different opinions, it's two people with opinions that clash so heavily. Like to put one extreme, you have the right that is abortion is murder, and the left that is abortion is healthcare. There's just no middle ground there.
I never said that.
No, I know.
I never said that
I'm
external
saying.
threat wasn't internal per se. I just said that external threat. Let me clarify. By external threat, I mean to the Constitution of the United States, right? That's the external threat that has happened before. Vietnam, kind of. That's really the most.
What do you mean the Constitution then? Because
we're already under threat with the Constitution.
Yeah,
I mean, people have been going after.
You have the fucking censorship that you see on big tech platforms with the Twitter files where they came out and said the FBI had been contacting Twitter saying you need to censor these people. You had the mainstream media all throughout COVID with all of the dumps saying that you're not allowed to talk about several drugs that had studies saying that you were allowed to use them. And I'm not going to say them right now because YouTube's still iffy on those rules and we could get canceled for it. You were not allowed to talk about the virus coming from a lab, which is just now starting to come back around. You were not allowed to talk about how the vaccinations were supposed to be safe and effective and that they prevented transmission, even though you had a chief officer from Pfizer testify in the EU saying that we never tested for the efficacy rate of the transmission. I mean, our constitutional rights have been under attack for decades. So you can't say that
and under attack.
We need
Well,
to-
so my counterpoint then, right? So if and I'm not disagreeing with you on the point, but if it is that serious, then why has nothing seriously happened yet? Right?
Because we're too
If-
divided,
if the-
really, you know. Like
I-
one
I-
side
that's-
is
but
behind
here's
it
the
and one
thing.
side's against it.
I
and-
get I
Exactly.
get what Bravo's saying. I say the same
Right.
thing all the time. I say it to people like Ronan all the time. Like if you remember, Ronan is always constantly bitching about everything. But I say the same thing to him. I'm like, what are you gonna do about it, Ronan? He's like, well, I'm not gonna do anything. And I'm like, well, then stop bitching. I get what Bravo is saying, but to that Bravo, I'd say it violence is kind of leaving the nature of modern man. It's becoming kind of polarized, or not polarized, sort of taboo, and one could argue it shouldn't be. Sometimes I make that argument that it shouldn't be. I don't think violence is never the answer. But
That's
but at the
definitely
same time,
the correct argument.
you gotta really think about it. But I get what you're saying. The reason for it though is it's becoming taboo. Like I personally, like, if you ask me, and I said this to Nick the other day, there are plenty of times when violence is the answer. It shouldn't ever be your first solution, but there are plenty of times when it is, and some might argue that we're at that point. Hell, we did a whole lot more violence for a whole lot less in the past in the history of America. But at the same time, that's where we're at, basically.
Yeah, this day and
That's
age,
just my big point.
this day and age,
And
people
I
are
agree with
just
you.
they're not going to resort to violence unless your life is at stake. People are no longer going to necessarily just put their lives on the line for, necessarily just ideals, unless you're in the armed forces, in which case you're not in the position. And we had this discussion, I think last week or the week before, about how the reality of a civil war is a very tenacious thing because of how our modern military is organized and how the people currently would struggle to fight against a regulated armed force. Like it just would.
Right, but
I-
you're going to have the same bifurcation in the military that you're having in the normal populace.
I
You're
don't
gonna have-
disagree.
you're
I
gonna have
don't
people
disagree.
in the military who just throw down their arms and not fight against the people, or they're going to fight against the government like the Constitution dictates to go after a tyrannical government.
I don't
I'm not
disagree.
sure
And that my point against that is, in order for that to be effective, and you have to have sections of the military, like entire armies, divisions, at least majorities of them. They're always going to have elements and people in there that go against them and either leave or have to be arrested or even killed at times. But you have to have sizable portions that are willing to go against it and seize military assets. And that was the point that we discussed before, was
So-
the only way to do it is you would have to have like entire bases rebel against, seize their assets, and immediately prepare to engage in an armed conflict with other, military organizations nearby. Basically, Moody Air Force Base in Tampa, Florida, the entire base would have to rebel at the same time. And that's just
So,
not
You're essentially
realistic.
playing, like I said last time, you're essentially playing anti-Stasi in real life, which
Well,
is really
okay, so
unrealistic.
actually, the funny point about this, and actually, really glad that you just showed up. You just came into a very nice conversation about the military.
Oh, I will. I just noticed. I will welcome Wyatt. Hello, Wyatt.
What's going on, everybody?
What's
We
happening?
are currently talking about, just give a brief recap for you, Wyatt.
There you go.
We kind of scrolled down the rabbit hole of, politics is divided. This country, it's screwed politically, right? Massive divisiveness in between two political factions that absolutely hate each other's guts for good reason that is seen on both sides, right? The left hates the right for reasons they think are just. The right hates the left for reasons they think are just. And we kind of went down the rabbit hole of like, what civil war, right? On the one side, violence isn't the answer. On the other side, you can only try politics so long, right? Warfare is politics by any other means. Some dude in like the 1880s said that. I can't remember who.
I mean, it comes down to a point, though. Look back on every big successful nation throughout history. Look at Rome. They had the exact same system that we have set up. They had a senate. They had an emperor, which is basically like their president, and they had terms, but they basically died.
Just do the republic.
Yeah,
Just
so
do
they
the
had,
republic where they had the senate and they had
they
the
had the-
one
right,
senior
consul.
senator.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had the left and right too. They had people that disagreed with them. Now, the only things that happened was that eventually they could only argue so much before, and the Roman Empire was so huge. You had the Western Empire, you had the Eastern Empire, and
That's
then
way down the line.
Yeah, that's
That's
not
way,
exactly.
way,
that's
way down
not,
the line.
Yeah.
That's technically not the Roman Empire. When the empire split, those are completely different things. The empire was at one point,
Yes.
or for most of history, was
However,
connected.
no, I'm just giving.
I know
a
exactly
basic-
what
yeah.
point you're making, Wyatt.
Yeah, I'm just giving a scenario, right? Say they split though, and it was kind of like a civil war, and it's kind of like the civil war that we had. Somebody had a disagreement. They thought that their side was better, and they split up because of it. And that would happen again. But who is more prepared in that situation? Talking's not going to get you through it. So who's more prepared in the situation if something does happen?
And so actually what we were just talking about right before you joined, and I agree with your point completely. But they had a lot more issues than just that. Look at their pay charts for one.
100%. I was just covering that it was sort of like
big
what we
bases.
have.
So Trevor, was talking about how, you would need, for a realistic civil war to happen, you would need it to mirror the American Civil War, where you had entire units kind of separate so that, they had all their logistics and this, that, the other. And what was it? The Nellis Air Force Base that you used?
I was using
in
Moody.
Florida? Moody. Same
Yeah.
thing. Doesn't matter. Air Force bases, screw those guys, right? Realistically, here's what would go down on a military base. If, Civil War starts, what's going to happen is there's going to be a little bit of shock, and commanders are going to try and get control. But at the same time, it's going to come down almost to a democratic vote where, most of the people you're going to get the majority of people who agree with one side, they're calling themselves a unit. Everybody who, is like company size, right? 120 people. If 90 of those people agree with each other and say, yeah, we're going on this side, those other 30 are going to find that group of 90 that's on their side, and then they're just going to split up that way. And it's going to, what I see happening is you're going to get the rift of combat arms and a direct combat support, and then your non-combat support jobs, right? So, in my experience, combat arms and combat support, people who actually are within 20 miles of the front lines, are generally on the side of the Constitution, period. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. Your non-combat support guys, the people who just sit in the rear or they sit on a base, they never really do anything. Those are the guys that join, oh, well, I'm getting college so I can get a liberal arts degree. And that's kind of how that split goes. It's just, why you can either confirm or deny that statement how you want.
I mean, you guys all know I did 8 years in the Marine Corps. I 100% agree with what you're saying. There's rifts every day with people in the military choosing sides constantly. There's kind of thrown out command a lot that's happened, and I would say in the last 10 years. I think if something did happen within the active military, I don't know much about National Guard or anything like that, but I know in the active military, I do believe that people would choose sides. And I think that there would be a group that would stay with the military and kind of do a federal kind of backing with it. And then I do believe that there will be people that will back their states from what's going to happen, whatever does happen, right? I mean, there will be people that'll go home, try to join up with them, but because they're going to try and protect what their families are and everything. And I think that, like you said, yeah, there's going to be groups that split left and right. And like you're saying, and I think what you're saying is the people even in the military, because the federal government will rely on the military to kind of do their bidding. And I think they're going to rely a little too heavily on that because they're not going to realize that people aren't going to stay and do what they want to do. I mean, take I think it was a couple years back, right? There was an order given out to, I think, a sheriff in California or Florida. I don't really remember,
I
but
think it was California. I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about.
the
Yeah.
one where they said that they were gonna allegedly go door to door and take guns and everything. Is that the one you're thinking
California.
of?
I think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, that was
California.
California.
California. Yeah,
It
and there
was
was a
only like a
sheriff.
year ago.
Yeah, there was a sheriff that said that literally sent out a letter to the county on all the residents, and he said, "Hey, listen, we know that this was put in place, but we are not going to back that because I don't follow them. I'm the sheriff of this county," which is sheriff, if nobody really knows, a sheriff of a county is the highest authority law enforcement officer that is in that entire county. So he outranks the city chiefs. He outranks like when something like that happens, the sheriff outranks everybody else. And he said, "Listen, guys, we're not going to go door to door. Number one, because I'm not going to risk my officers' lives to take your guns away. And number two, we actually uphold the Constitution where we're not going to take those guns from you. I know that's not the subject we're covering here and everything with guns, but I'm just saying that people will choose sides because they know what's right and what's wrong. And so everybody's going to have those bases on where they're going to choose. And, it just comes down to the individual person who's going to do what.
So,
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
so to kind of bring back my point that I was trying to make last week, because I have two very intelligent friends who are able to articulate a little bit better than I was able to. Well, I think that if a civil war were to happen, and I still stand by that. I think it will happen. Maybe not right now, but in the near future, it's going to look a lot more like the Syrian civil war. It's going to look a lot more like civil wars that you see throughout the whole world, where it's a bunch of factions vying for power and trying to fill the gap as quickly as possible. It's not going to be North and South like it was back in the first American Civil War. It's going to be much more bifurcated. It's going to be much more sporadic. It's going to look like a lot more guerrilla warfare as opposed
gonna
to
be bloody.
armies. Yes, it's going to definitely be bloody, and you're going to see what side takes power. You're going to have a lot of them gathered together because they believe in a core set of objective morals, and then you're going to get a bunch of them that group together with some subjective morals or very woke style thinking. And I'm interested to see what comes out on top, whether it's going to be the collective or the individualistic morality that comes out on top. You're going to have the constitutionalists or the democratic or the democracy.
Yeah,
The
I agree.
Democratic side.
Are you the one? Are you the one pulling stuff up right now?
I am. I have
Okay,
the screen.
hey, Trevor,
only ones
pull
who-
something up for me real fast. I just wanted to have this a visual for the audience. Right?
Put it in articles. Put the link in
yeah.
articles.
No, it's something
Jimmy,
you
pull
can
this
just
up.
look up. You can just look it up.
You gotta send it to him.
Jamie,
Okay.
can you pull this up?
Yeah, Jamie,
Jamie?
could you pull this up?
Yeah, Jamie, pull this up. Pull this up for me. Hold on.
Let's get this to Trevor. We'll kind of give our finishing statements here, and then we'll end it. We've gone on for quite a while. We're at about an hour and a half.
It has
I
been
mean-
probably one of my most favorite conversations.
I agree.
Of our
I agree.
podcast so far. It has been
Okay.
phenomenal tonight, everybody.
I got
Oh,
this
yeah.
for you.
Yeah, we're not done.
Yeah,
We got a
put it
little
in
bit more.
articles.
but let's not
We
go too
got a little bit
deep.
more. Hey, I just got here. Come on, we can go a little bit more. Don't worry about
Hey,
it.
you show up late.
This
I
will be
know.
the
I know.
We gave you that 15-minute plus hit time. 15 minutes prior. Come on now.
Okay.
You know this stuff.
Yeah,
You
I know.
show up
I know.
late, you want to leave early. Come on, man.
Pull that up. That link that I just
Yep.
put in articles for us.
Article 5 of the Constitution.
No.
Yeah, Jamie, pull this up.
Yeah,
Second Amendment.
Jamie, can you pull this up for me?
Can you pull
Let me
that
just
officer
hide.
from the sex
There you go.
scandal?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just end with
Yeah.
with your face.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Yeah.
Looking like Morty.
Man, he's having trouble pulling this up.
It's
Oh,
pulled
you're
up.
trying to show the county map. You're trying to show the
Yes,
county
yes,
map.
I am.
You want the county?
100%. I'm trying to do the house. Do the house.
You want the house? Okay.
I want the house. The house always.
Oh,
wins.
are you
I gotta
talking
take a
about
look at this. Hold on.
how it's the entirety of the country except for the cities?
No, I'm gonna
Top-
touch on
top
right
cover.
now. I'm
To the
gonna.
left. It says
I'm gonna-
house.
Oh, I'm dumb. Sorry. There you
Yeah.
go. I'm a bad Jamie.
What,
Guys,
Okay.
come on now. Get on
What-
his level.
Get on my level right here.
what are
boys.
you doing? It's boxes now. Oh, there we go.
There's a slight
Okay.
delay. There's a slight delay.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So we're looking at house, right? Okay. You see all the red and blue, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just how he was saying, where you are not going to have a north and south, what is dominated throughout the almost entire region is
Oh, it's-
Republican, right? So those are your conservative. So I am agreeing with you that it is not going to be a north and south conflict. You're going to
No.
have these pockets everywhere,
Mhm.
right? So all these pockets are gonna, and if you notice, the left, the West Coast and the East Coast are the ones that are mostly highlighted blue. But what the conservatives have and the Republicans, most of them are conservatives. They have the middle, and they have all the resources that they need in order to do a prolonged war. Because what does the West Coast and the East Coast rely on? Right? They rely on the crops. They rely on electricity. They rely on blue collar workers. They were, the list goes on and on and on. I could literally be here all day telling you what they rely on. They're not going to be able to have a prolonged war. Just looking at California, they wouldn't be able to survive any type of conflict because they need water from Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and Oregon right there. And they need to draw in all that. So they're almost out of the picture in the first beginning. And, you're going to have those pockets everywhere where you're going to have those conflicts. And eventually, if something does happen, and I predict that something might happen within 10 years, that's my guess. And that's purely off of just my belief. But I think if something does happen within 10 years, I think it'd be a very, very quick war if something does happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I like
But
playing
would
devil's
actually
advocate.
disagree.
Yeah,
It-
I would disagree with that one as well.
I
It is not
else
quick.
before we get to devil's advocate, I would disagree because of just the nature of what this would look like. So we can
Okay,
look
but
at this
it, but it,
red-
but
we-
expand
yeah,
on that for me.
that's what I'm doing. Look at the red and the blue. Yeah,
Okay.
on a simple level, when you look at the red and the blue, you say, all right, there's not as much. Realistically, those are very large areas of people, and we're not just going to be going into cities and killing everybody. Another thing you have to consider is this shows Republican and Democrat, but you have a lot of these libertarian types. Libertarians are the worst kind of people because they're just Democrats with guns.
I resent that.
Yeah.
So
they're
what do you
just
what do you
communist.
believe then?
I just don't believe it'd be quick. I think saying it'd be quick would be, it's like saying Ukraine would be quick, or how we used to say Ukraine was going to be quick.
I think
You
that this would be
never
very
really
different
know.
than that. I
It
do
would be
agree that
very
it would be
different.
very, it would be a very, there would be stages to it. And my devil's advocate point of view is you are absolutely 100% right that when you look at a map like this, it is very, very segregated. But I think that often people take this map and then still have in their minds the thought process of as if this was going to be fought in 1865. This is going to be completely different scenario. And that's why looking at this map doesn't really have an impact, because at the end of the day, we're in a globalized world, and what is recognized as the quote unquote official government is what would be supported by foreign nations that are allied with us. Canada would side with the official government. Mexico would side with the official government. The UK would side with the official government. And typically, the way that it would usually span out is, I don't think that the Democrats are going to be the ones that would spark this at the end of the day.
To be fair, if you're talking about us,
If it
or
were
the
to-
other government supporting what is quote unquote the actual government, just look at how the U.S. has been supporting all the rebel groups throughout the Middle East. And
I mean,
going
it's a debatable situation.
Very,
So
it would be
I'll go
very
through it both
random,
ways.
Very sporadic. It would be very
So I think
random,
I
very
know-
sporadic.
I think I know what you're getting at there, Trevor. And actually, it kind of raises a couple of interesting process points, right? Just talking points, I guess we'll call them. So one, you have, okay, well, who would end up being the official government? Because that's actually that's hypercritical, right?
And typically it depends on who's in the office. And that's what I'm saying. Like, so there's two scenarios where, say this happens today, Democrats are in office. They would be recognized as the official government, and, the senators and House representatives that are up in Washington that are siding with the other side, they're going to be detained as foreign insurrectionists, and the entire control is going to shift to the Democratic Party. And it would happen vice versa if, say, next election cycle, a Republican gets voted in, and that's when this sparks up. It'd be a similar scenario. But the point I'm getting at is further than that. It's just the central idea of there'd be external influences that are playing into this much more than especially immediately happened in the Civil War. I mean, obviously France came in and Britain came in, and they were playing a part in that, in the war in 1861 and 1865. They definitely played a key role, but it would nowhere near be as influential as it would in modern times. And a lot of that resolves around, there's a large base over here, and you see all blue. If you're going by the idea of, okay, well, people are in the states are going to side with their states, the issue I have with that is, okay, well, then you're basically saying they're going to have to side with the National Guard, because the government is going to raise the National Guard if there's any kind of insurrection action, right? And it still revolves around, okay, well, they're going to have to seize military assets at military bases, at military armories. And, it goes into this idea of, well, will the National Guard go ahead and act against the federal government at the behest of whatever governor there is? And it's just a question of who's going to follow whose orders.
Exactly.
Like there's no assertion that will happen, and the person with the most authority and the most, what's the word I'm looking for here?
Influence.
Not even influence. The most legitimacy. The most legitimacy is the one that will garner the most influence, and at the end of the day will have the most supplies, resources, and manpower, immediate skilled manpower. Because, I mean, Remy, you can talk on this. How long does it take to train and be effective in the M1 Abrams? It's not something that you can just hop in a tank like in GTA and be effective.
So, how we do it now, it's 16 weeks, but realistically, you could probably push that down to 12 if you were in a crunch. And
yeah,
the
but
big thing-
he's
and this is
asking
something
if
that you
who would be effective. So those guys are getting trained.
So in a crunch, while cities are being bombed,
maximum,
strategic targets are being striked, do you have 12 weeks to train, thousands of people that you have to immediately recruit and bring into this armed force, and you don't even know how many tanks you have that are effectively being struck as you're trying to get these people trained in these vehicles? No, it would be a lightning war, and then it would dissolve into more of a kind of, getting rid of this pocket and this pocket, and then people would be recruited. And that's why there would be stages of the war. There would be the initial stage where it's all about seizing control of as much critical infrastructure as you can and as much resources, military resources, as you can. And then it would devolve into insurgency.
Oh yeah, well,
Yeah,
it's
I can't
theory
see
in a
the
nutshell.
possibility of like a coherent and organized civil war, at least in America in the modern day.
Yeah,
would
it
be
would not
very
look like
spor-
1865.
No.
very sporadic, very random, and then one of the 7 people who live in Wyoming will some reason have a 25 millimeter machine gun on their horse and carriage. Like it'll just be random. It'll be weird. Some people won't know what the hell's going on. They'll just be having fun with it. And it would just be very strange. Like
Well, I
it
mean,
definitely
that's
wouldn't be
even
fast.
just
You can almost say it would put us so far down a toilet. It might even be long. It might not even be like an
well.
average timed war. It might be a long war.
So realistically, the way I see it, all right, and what we've been talking about is good because all of this is relevant, right? All of this is, that's something that we need to think about. But the way I see it is, should this happen, pray that it doesn't, all the fun stuff. What I think is going to happen is it's going to initially look like Syria, but then it's going to turn into the downfall of Rome. Because if you remember your history right, Time-Lapse talked about it a little bit.
Which downfall of Rome?
The
Yeah, which
Western
one?
Empire, right?
Because
So
there's like 6 downfalls of Rome.
So I'm talking about the 4th century downfall, right?
Talk about when it
Where-
split into the Byzantine.
So not entirely that part. That part we're going to ignore for right now, for convenience sake.
Just for
When-
right now.
So
Yeah,
Before
you'll
the
ignore the
split,
Byzantines.
and
Yeah, because the
everything
Eastern
that was
Empire
going on-
survived all the way well into like 1100, 1200 because they started the
Yeah.
Crusades.
The Western Roman Empire, when it split up, it wasn't a fast process. You know, it was the slow decay of the borders. Whoopee! What are we fucking looking at right now? Slow decay of the borders, multiple external threats that just you can't get rid of. You don't have the manpower anymore to just go throw the herd on them, beat them down, and then call it a day. And then you have your internal stuff, and I think that is what would happen, right? You have all your internal issues that we've been talking about, but now you're throwing China, North Korea, Russia, Iran, Afghanistan again. You're throwing all these into the mix, and it's like, yeah, you have some small countries. Europe might help, Canada might help, they might not. But that was the same thing with the Romans when they had some of their client states, like in Spain. You know, these provinces were like, well, yeah, I really don't give a shit. You guys conquered us. We don't actually are not obligated to you whatsoever. And I think that's kind of how NATO would go. And so now it's not just an internal thing, like Trevor was saying. This is a wildly externally factored event. And that's why I say, personally, like I said, pray it doesn't happen. We're looking at the second downfall of Rome, more or less, because if a civil war starts, there is no more United States.
And if
Well,
you don't think that people aren't going to see us at a civil war and take that for their advantage to prey on the U.S., then I don't know what. But
A civil war would essentially shift the world into, for all intents and purposes, like a new age. It would be a
Yeah.
completely new age of humanity.
Exactly like Rome. I mean, quite literally, we compare Rome again, you know, Western Rome falls. Now we can talk about the Byzantines, right? Western Rome falls. It's
Those
still
guys.
kind of there, but it's a weird puppet state, and it's really just a shell. And then you have the Byzantines. They're like, yeah, we lived. Power transfer to the east. That happens with the U.S. Power transfer to the east. China and Russia are now the big dogs. Without the US, NATO is almost useless in anything other than small, localized events like Ukraine.
yeah.
Past
Yeah.
that, forget about it. NATO might as well not exist. Now there's
Forget
a power
about it.
transfer to the east.
100%, man. Like I mean, the shift of powers would be so dramatic that I don't think NATO would be a thing anymore. I think that a lot of other countries would shift over to the winning side, because if they no longer have the US and we're feuding with ourselves so much in the process that it tears our country apart, or, you know, while we're feuding, that other countries come in and they swoop up stuff and they're like, oh man, or like Russia says, oh man, I really like Alaska. Well, that's mine now. I mean, there's no way that we'd be able to fight that back or anything, and it would happen so fast that we wouldn't realize that our feud with ourselves just destroyed the whole nation before actually probably a war could even break out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a scary thought, right? And it might scare, you know, Wyatt, I know it'll scare the bejesus out of you because you have that inkling, right?
Mhm.
Brandon, Trevor, you know, you guys might get like a glimpse, but when I say that I guarantee that we are not the first ones to come to this conclusion, and that somebody in China, somebody in Russia came to the exact same conclusion, but they are in a position of power in those countries, and they work actively right now. I guarantee it that they are working actively to see that end happen. That
Well,
scares
Oh,
the
the
bejesus
thing is,
out of me.
That's
I
been the thing
recognize
for
that. You know,
ages, yeah.
they've
Like
always
it's
been working towards our downfall since, you know, the
yeah,
end of World
the
War
Cold
II,
War.
and
Yeah.
since communism and capitalism were kind of face to face against
We
each
can
other.
blame
Oh,
Nixon
But-
for
It's
it.
like some people say the Cold War
But
hasn't
it's the
ended; it
thought
just
of
shifted to
how they're
China.
doing it now and how this exact scenario, right? The one we just got done, the one that we were discussing, this exact scenario that, you know, yeah, they were trying to beat us when we were in the Cold War. Now they see the political division and that's what they're going after.
I agree.
Scares the bejesus
Well,
out of me.
But
Well,
the
don't get-
one thing I will say in the issue I have, and the reason why I don't think that a civil war is realistically going to happen soon, as much as political division as there is, I think that there's enough people with enough brains in positions of power that recognize exactly what would happen if you know, we decided, hey, I'm going to take up arms against this person, and then it would just spiral from there. They're not going to do it because they have the brains to realize, if I did this, it would be a downward spiral. And at the end of the day, I'm going to be the king of the ashes. And there's no point in doing it.
Right, but within the next 10 years even, do you feel like that people are going to become more logical or less logical? And are they going to want to feed their desires for power, money, or anything like that? Or are they going to look at it and be like, hey, man, we probably shouldn't do that and we should just unify all the Americans together?
Well,
I
what
will
Trevor,
say-
what Trevor just said is in the end they're gonna think about it and they're gonna say, "Well, I'm king of the ashes," and that's not saying I agree with Trevor. I'm just that was kind of his point. Is they're
Right,
gonna
but
be
I'm
like,
saying-
"I'm
The
king
people
of
in
the
power
ashes,
aren't
so it's
going
not
to
gonna matter."
going to do anything because they don't want to, you know, be the king of the ashes, which is, you know, king of nothing essentially. I think that
Right,
as
but
so
do you think
long
that-
as the general public is appeased, which currently most people, they have their gripes, but they're happy enough they're not going to go and, you know, throw themselves on a burning fire and kill themselves. As long as the general public is appeased and the peaceful transition of power persists in America, there will not be a civil war.
But has there been peaceful transitions of power? I mean, look at the last election. Was there
The
a
last
peaceful
two elections.
the last two elections? Do you believe that that was a peaceful transition of power?
That was
without-
those were
with-
That was absolutely
those
a
were
peaceful
absolutely
transition of
peaceful
power.
transitions,
Yeah, but
Trump
people
conceded.
people
People,
just
the
being mad
people.
about it
That's a
doesn't
different
make
thing.
it a violent.
That's
That's different.
completely
That's
different.
not a
What I mean
violent
by
transition.
a
No one
violent
took up
transition
arms.
is somebody seizing the presidency by force or refusing it. Basically, a violent transition would have been if Trump called in the Washington National Guard and said, I am not leaving the White House. He conceded. He left the White House. That's peaceful.
Right,
But,
and that
but
goes.
Nancy Pelosi called a meeting with all the national directors, called a meeting with generals saying that if Trump were to say anything, you are to disregard his order entirely. She called for crew-served machine guns for the fucking inauguration. She
And
was
What I
doing
could
military
say,
against
what
him.
I could say to that is, well, again, like me and Trevor said, that was absolutely peaceful transitions. I can say that from what Nick is saying there, that could be the precursor to an eventual not peaceful transition.
And that's why I'm saying if
But
the
so
next
far, they've
one
been
they
peaceful,
go
yeah.
further, that's when something will happen. If there is not a
Yeah.
peaceful transition, that is
Right,
the
and-
line
and
that
that-
it will take in order for the American people
So
to rally
what
behind
Wyatt
the
is
idea.
saying, so what Wyatt is saying to you is, do you believe that in the next 10 years will that happen? And I'm just trying to guide the conversation because we do need that
Yeah,
end
yeah.
here soon.
What basically I don't think that it's going to happen in the next 10 years. But what do I know? I'm just a random guy.
Yeah, you're just a random guy from the streets of Brooklyn who's gonna get the super soldier serum.
Hey,
Captain
I'm
America.
walking here.
Hey, I'm from Brooklyn, eh?
Ah, jeez. All right. Well, we went over a lot here, but we while we had actually pretty good viewers today, we're kind of dying down here. So I'm saying that it is a good time to end. There's definitely a lot of things we can talk about next time that we can still stem off of this conversation. But
Oh,
I'll say it
absolutely.
is. But I will say, I've said my piece. I think everyone here has said enough. Wyatt, you're with us. Do you have a quote for
one
everyone?
one thing real quick. Coming up in the next couple of weeks, I know I've already started it, but we are going to be putting out solo episodes for topics that each of us are interested in. To hopefully try to do more daily uploads. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you like them and subscribe to the channel so that you can get notified when we put them up. Sorry for interrupting.
Absolutely.
You're all right.
And actually, just to kind of piggyback off of that, got a little teaser for everybody. Because of some connections I have with a couple friends, I'm actually going to be talking to a former U.S. service member who got back from the Ukraine like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. He's been there since I think March or April of last year, so right around the beginning of the war. I'm going to be talking with him, going to have a good conversation, and that is going to come out probably sometime in the next 2 weeks. I'll try and keep it to 30 minutes. So that'll be a really cool little questionnaire breakdown off of like what's actually happening from a guy that was there.
That's really cool.
That sounds phenomenal.
That'll be
It's gonna be awesome. The guy's a really cool dude, good buddy of mine. So it's gonna be dope.
That's
Whiskey
good.
Boy exclusive.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Whiskey
Look,
Boy
exclusive interview.
Yeah. Well, Wyatt, yeah, do you have something for everybody? I know you
I
said
mean,
you
you
wanted
know,
to
I
do
always
that.
got quotes, man. I got
All right,
quotes on
let's
quotes. I got one that
hear it.
will fall into what we were talking about today.
All right,
Um,
let's hear it.
so this one was actually by none other than Julius Caesar, right?
Mhm.
He said, "It's easier to find men who will volunteer to die than to find those who are willing to endure pain with patience." So, I mean, there you go.
Very good. Well,
Yep,
there you go.
that is a good one.
There's Wyatt's quote there that he's been itching to give you probably since the
Right.
first podcast.
Been itching.
My name is Brandon. My friends here are all lovely people. I had a bit of a tongue twister there. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will talk to you all later.
Adios.